Hasselblad's new camera and new lens X2DII 100c and 35-100. In terms of who this camera is for, personally, I think a lot of people, when they think about Hasselblad, they think about their H series cameras or their 503, 907. They think about tripods, studio work, very serious, slow photography. This camera basically takes the advantage of those cameras, being the Hasselblad's colors being so true to life, and the image quality of those cameras, but make it more compact, faster autofocus, easy to carry around with IBIS. Basically like a travel, easy to use version of those very well-loved Hasselblad cameras. The image quality on the X2DII is really good. First of all, it's a medium format camera. It's a way bigger sensor compared to full frame. That gives it so much more light into the sensor and gives it way bigger dynamic range compared to any of the full frame cameras on the market. So basically it has 15.3 stops of dynamic range. You don't have to worry about being overexposed or underexposed because you can always salvage it through post-processing. Just keep in mind you're getting a camera that's 100 megapixels with a lot of dynamic range, so every raw files you get from it, be prepared, it might be up to 200 megabytes, so probably get a better hard drive. And another limitation with this camera is that it only has one color setting, being the Hasselblad natural color system. So if you would like to experiment more colors or just have black and white colors straight out of the camera, this might not be the right one for you. There's good and bad in that because you always have a file that looks true to life and you can adjust it either way. So this camera also has HDR. That basically means a mode for high dynamic range. HDR basically means taking multiple photos at different exposures and then merging them to create an image that's not overexposed and not underexposed. This is especially helpful for landscape photographers or even when you're just traveling and maybe the place you're at, you're just so happen to be facing away from the sun and you don't want to use a flash. That is a feature that is quite useful. As for the limitations of this mode, I would say it's mainly in the processing power of this camera. When you're taking an HDR photo, it might take a couple seconds for the camera to fully process it. And during that time, you cannot zoom into the photo to have a look at it, or you cannot turn off the HDR mode. Even if you turn off the camera, it might take a couple seconds to do the countdown and to finish the processing and then turn off. So basically, we're using it at auto white balance, but even when we're using it at exactly the same scene, maybe just 3 seconds apart, the two images have clearly different white balance settings. I find that slightly frustrating, but when you're manually setting the white balance, the colors are pretty good. So the autofocus in this camera is greatly improved by introducing the DJI's LiDAR system. So basically this is autofocusing by laser and the reflection of that laser. The biggest limitation with this LiDAR focusing system would be if your subject is really far away and then the LiDAR system is not exactly bouncing off and receiving back as well. And then another scenario is when you're standing in front of a glass window. That's when the LiDAR system can be a little bit hit and miss. And this one also introduced continuous autofocus and subject detection. Continuous autofocus works way better with their new lens, being the 35-100. Compared to their older lenses. By older lenses, we have to separate V series lenses and non-V series lenses. Take this 75mm as an example. By the time we test it, we cannot use the continuous autofocus on this, and a lot of times it's just not focusing fast enough. If you really have to compare this lens on this camera and comparing this lens on the previous model, it is quicker, but not as quick as the 35-100. Even if I'm comparing the 55V, to the 35-100, I can definitely tell the 35-100 is faster than the 55V. This camera also has custom focus mode. When you're at custom focus, you can literally select what size and where you want the focus area to be just with the touchscreen. I find that very straightforward and easy to use. The stabilization has also improved greatly compared to the predecessor, being the 7 stops IBIS, and this one it's up to 10 stops. So basically you can pretty much do handheld 1 second or even slower shutter speed. A big reason why the IBIS on this camera is so good is because it's using leaf shutter in the lenses. So leaf shutter basically minimizes the shaking, improving the success rate when you're using very slow shutter speed. Being 10 stop IBIS does not mean you have to take 2 2-second handheld or even 4-second handheld, it means when you have to take a photo at a relatively slow shutter speed, say like 1/4 of a second or 1/2 of a second, you have the confidence that you can do it while being handheld. This camera has built-in 1TB SSD and then a CF Type-B card slot. So the good thing with that is because it's such a big sensor, so literally every file that comes out of it is going to be massive. It just takes a lot of write speed and read speed just to go through the images. So it's good to have that 1TB in there. Even if your card is like all full or you just completely forgot to bring a card, at least you can still definitely use your camera. If you're using this camera, download their Focus app. That one works extremely well on their mobile end. If you're using iPhone or iPad, you can pretty much export the HDR images and just share from there. They improved greatly on the build of this camera. So this is a lot more scratch resistant compared to the previous generation. This camera, compared to the predecessor, it has a way better screen. So right now, not only you can tilt it downwards, you can also pull it out to make it real flat like that, instead of having the EVF getting into the way when you're looking down. Also, it added the 5D joystick, so this is way better compared to the previous one where you actually have to swipe on the screen to scroll through images. This is especially useful when you're trying to select which area you're trying to focus on. I find the UI of this camera very beginner friendly. If you have any experience with using phone's touchscreen, you can get away with using this camera. Today we have the Lens XCD 35-100 f2.8 to f4 that basically have the faster autofocus motor. So this is an external zoom lens. So if you're in the rain, in the snow, be careful. This lens is relatively compact. It's literally the size of my palm. The thread size is 86. So that's a size that's gonna be a little bit difficult to find a good filter, but you can always step up to 95. As for the maximum aperture, it drops from 2.8 to 3.2 at around 37-38mm. And then at around 55, it drops down to 3.5 maximum, and around 70mm, it drops down to f4 maximum. It has 3 rings on this lens, being the focusing ring, the zoom ring, and aperture ring. And then on each ring, it's covered with the letter H logo for Hasselblad. If you like the letter H, this is the lens for you. You don't really have to get the camera to get more H from this. If this is your first camera, I would definitely recommend getting it with the lens, with the 35-100mm lens. It is a great starting point for any beginner photographer because on a full frame equivalent, it's roughly a 28 to 80-ish zoom lens. So that would pretty much cover most of your need, and because the maximum aperture is f2.8, so even if you're doing Astro, I guess you can definitely still use it at 35 f2.8. Another thing I would recommend getting is a good CFB card with decent write and read speed, just to make sure you get all the files on your card fast. Another thing to get if you are into landscape would be a square filter system. So this one, unfortunately, due to its very niche filter thread size, if you're getting the round filter, you might need to get a step-up ring, or your choices will be quite limited because basically you're either getting 86 or just step down from 95. Those round filters can be quite expensive. Yeah, so basically getting a square system and then adapt on here. Even if you get future lenses later on, you can still use the same system, and you know you will be getting really good landscape photos from the same set of filters. So compared to the previous generation, this one, they improved the autofocus, so now it has continuous autofocus, it has LiDAR autofocus, and then subject detection. The base ISO has dropped from 64 to 50. It has 10 stops IBIS compared to the previous one, which is 7 stops. And this one has HDR mode. The dynamic range has improved from 15 stops to 15.3 stops. In terms of colors, compared to the X2D, I see different statements online. Sometimes people think the XCD looks better, some people think the second generation looks better. For me, I feel like the monitor, from the monitor itself, it looks slightly more yellowish than the first generation, but when the images are exported, it looks very similar, but I feel like this one might be slightly more accurate to what you actually see with your naked eye. If you're more of a landscape people, I would say you don't have to upgrade, but if you have a lot of continuous fast-moving things to shoot, then this is a good upgrade. So that is a review on the Hasselblad X2DII 100c and the 35-100 lens. If you have any thoughts or comments, please let us know down below.